you're going to get a lot of these firms that come to you and say, hey, we are ready to implement AI, but what does ready mean in practice? And then what common misconceptions do you see from, hey, we're ready, to you looking at their current status and saying, I think we need to talk?
The most common misconception about readiness is people think it's about technology. You know, when a firm comes to us, and kind of like you just said, Nick, they've basically selected a platform. They've already signed a contract, and they frame it as we're ready to implement, and we need help implementing. But when I come in and I talk to them, I'm like, what you really mean is you made a purchasing decision. You didn't really think about it.
Most AEC firms will tell you they're ready for AI, but according to the boots on the ground inside those organizations, many of them are not even close. So the gap isn't in tools or technology. It's typically the foundation that those tools are supposed to run on, and is the reason so many AI pilots in the AEC industry never make it past the pilot stage. Today, we're joined by two guests who are working on that problem from both sides of the table. Ron Smiley is the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Wiley Wilson, a 125-year-old architecture and engineering firm where he leads technology strategy and digital transformation across the organization. Alex Ryan is the Chief Executive Officer of Reich, a data and AI consultancy serving AEC, manufacturing, and aerospace firms on data strategy and secure AI implementation. In this conversation, we're getting into what AI readiness means in practice, why so many implementations stall, and what firms need to address first, and then what the gap looks like between how AI is being sold to the industry and what firms need to get lasting value from it. So if you're a firm leader, technology decision maker, or someone trying to figure out where AI fits inside your organization and whether your firm is ready to make that jump, this is an episode you will not want to miss. But before we jump in, I want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, a series of in-person events we've created at EMI for AEC project managers and leaders who develop them. You want to stay on top of PM trends, elevate your team, and deliver stronger project results? These full-day events are built for you. We're coming to Kansas City this October. Learn more and register at aecpmconnect.com, and I hope to see you there. With that, let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our conversation of the week with Ron Smiley and Alex Ryan. Ron and Alex, thank you both so much for taking the time to join the show, and welcome.
Thanks for having us, Nick.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I know we had a very nice and a little lengthy pre-recording discussion, which I always appreciate, guys, but we're going to jump right into it here. So I love these tandem interviews because it gives unique perspective, allows the three of us to build off each other, but we'll start the first question in tandem. So Ron, a CTO at Wiley Wilson, and Alex as the founder of Reich, which is a data and AI consultancy serving AEC and manufacturing firms, walk us through your current roles and what led each of you to focus specifically on AI and technology strategy in this industry. And then, guys, if you'd like to give any more info about your companies before you get us kicked off for more context, that is also perfect. So, gentlemen, please go right ahead.
Sure. Alex, I don't know if you want to start.
Sure, man. Yeah. So, I before my kind of merging as a subsidiary of Wiley Wilson under Ron and team, I spent most of my career within the either enterprise or Microsoft partner space. So previously, right before this, I kind of built out my Azure practice, or Azure and AI practice, with a Microsoft partner on the West Coast. It's grew it from zero, from scratch, to a few million over a few year time, which actually really taught me a lot about AI systems in general and just working with complex environments. And then when the opportunity kind of came to fruition, when I was talking with Ron to kind of take Reich and make it out as a subsidiary under Wiley Wilson, it really just, when I understood more of the AEC space in general, they have some of the most complex operational data challenges I've seen, and there's how project focused things really are, and how much depth it actually takes to really serve them, and how much depth the need for things they deserved. And I saw a lot of the other AI markets, or consulting market in general, was really chasing the big flashy things like finance or healthcare, or all the big flashy things. So I felt like AEC was just this more getting handed generic solutions that didn't account for how project driven and deep the business actually was. So kind of when we got the structure set up, everything was pretty deliberate. So I'm not an outside firm advising AEC companies. I'm actually inside and owned by an AEC or AE firm and delivering work to other AEs and other verticals out there.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think Alex's perspective on the AE industry is spot on. We've got a lot of disparate systems, a lot of manual data entry that's disconnected once it goes in. Then you got to enter it again 3 times later in different other systems. And for me, I started off on the engineering side as an electrical engineer, moved to project management, and saw that gap in real time at a 125-year-old company, which Wiley Wilson is. It's employee owned. We're encouraged to kind of own the problems and figure out solutions and bring them to the front. And so I worked with our leadership to develop the first CTO role for Wiley Wilson to try to address that problem. Data governance. How do we make sure that the data goes in once, the interdependent workflows that depend on it get informed by it, and we are following that data from inception to where it's actually needed. And unless we do that, we're not going to be able to make use of any AI tools. We're just going to be buying things off the shelf that don't help us. And so I'm very honored to be in the role I'm in. It's a big learning role. It's a structural role more than a process role. And I think the challenges that I've got have been made immeasurably better because of Alex's partnership and working with him. And I'm fortunate to have him as part of my mentorship path.
Which is awesome, guys, because as you well know, there are enough generic AI consultants and gurus who understand, I'd say less than zero if I could, about this industry. Yeah, and you Alex, you made a great point. It's like, hey, here's the playbook for SaaS or healthcare, fine, or whatever. And then it's like, yeah, these old, backwards seeming industry in AEC. It's like, we'll come in and we'll disrupt it.
Yeah.
Well, there's a long track record of companies who've tried to do that and just don't succeed. And I think, Alex, you both eloquently kind of gave some insight into as to why older, more traditional companies, fragmented, and it is a unique business to be in. So I think there's a lot to unpack today, which then leads me into my next question, Alex. So you're going to get a lot of these firms that come to you and say, hey, we are ready to implement AI, but what does ready mean in practice? And then what common misconceptions do you see from, hey, we're ready, to you looking at their current status and saying, I think we need to talk?
Honestly, that's one of my favorite questions is like, feel like the most common misconception about readiness is people think it's about technology. So, when a firm comes to us and kind of like you just said, Nick, they've basically selected a platform. They've already signed a contract and they frame it as we're ready to implement and we need help implementing. But when I come in and I talk to them, I'm like, what you really mean is you made a purchasing decision. You didn't really think about all the other things around it. That's not the same thing as being ready in my mind. So when I ask what, people, I'm like, when ready, and I flip the script on them, what it looks like in practice, I'm mostly asking a few questions. So it's usually 4 questions I ask. So do you know where your critical operation data lives and what the condition of it is in today? Do you know, where it's stored, who's accessing and all that fun stuff? Do you have clear ownership process of the new AI system and what it's supposed to improve or what it's supposed to do? Have you mapped, to Ron's point, security and access boundaries? So you know who's going to access it, who's going to actually be able to see what, and then finally just can you define what success looks like in 6 months, a year, whatever? What does success look like? What's your roadmap for success, basically? And most people always try to give me technical metrics, but really it's operational. It's all the things that just don't go into the technology portion of it. So most firms I talk to, I would say on average, give me one good answer of those 4 questions. Very few can answer 2, and I'm yet to meet someone that could answer all 4 of them. And if I do, they're gonna be my favorite client because they're clearly going to be well thought out and just be we're ready to go. But I feel like that's where the big gap is, where implementation starts is where the most failure happens because you're not fully ready. The misconception I always push back on the hardest is the idea that data quality problems will get fixed during the implementation, they'll all of a sudden get uncovered and you're going to fix them. It doesn't happen. It never happens. They mostly just get exposed during the implementation and then they stay exposed. And at the worst possible time, after you committed the budget, you bought a tool, you signed a contract, the timeline's set, you got to deliver in some ungodly quick time. I firmly believe the firms that take let's say 6 to 8 weeks or a month or 2, just to really honestly assess your current environment, your current timeline, your roadmap, all the other pieces before you even sign a single, sign a new, platform or sign a, implementation with a firm like me. That's really where the work begins and the we're actually finishes before it starts, and then the implementation is usually much smoother after that.
Strong project outcomes need skilled managers and competent leaders. EMI's corporate training delivers expert-led courses in project management and people leadership, plus industry-recognized certification and exclusive premium content to take your team even further. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training.
And Ron, I have to imagine, right, that you can speak to this because, right, you're the CTO of Wiley Wilson engineering firm, like you said, over a century of history. So building off of what Alex just said, how are you evaluating what AI tools are worth integrating into the practice and then everything else that comes along with it?
Yeah, it's interesting seeing Alex's perspective because he's getting problems after they've been surfaced. In the CTO role, you're getting thrown solutions, you're getting thrown symptoms. And so I get like, okay, here's this cool AI tool. And really the first step that we have to answer internally is what's the problem we're trying to solve? Is it measurable? Alex hit on that. Can we actually put some metrics to it and measure how it's going to succeed? Are we measuring it now? How are we doing it without AI? Is it something that we can compare before and after? So we have to make sure that we've got the problem defined. Is there a vendor pitch that really attracted someone, but is just a bunch of flash? So number two is how integration ready is it really? Does it connect to Deltek? Does it connect to Revit, to Bluebeam even? How can we actually put it into our workflows? And then is the workflow it depends on even something that the pipeline's accessible. Like we have those silos still where the tool that we're trying to, that captures the data that AI tool needs, it's completely walled off and there's no way we can get it. And maybe it's got an API, but you can get like 5 pieces of information out of it and you got to query it and you can't get any files that go in or out. You can't put anything in. I mean, there's still these problems, these disparate systems that are siloed off. And so I think it's tough because I end up saying no a lot. And I think the reality is that people want to hear this AI tool is going to solve the process problem. But the process problem can't be solved by the tool. It's got to be fixed at an organization. It has to be owned at an organizational level. There has to be a technology governance team at the top that's leading these efforts, connecting them. Otherwise, it's somebody who's just, okay, I want this tool. I'm going to go make it happen. And I'm not going to involve the 10 other functions of the organization that need to be involved. And so we end up with a one-off tool that doesn't get used. And it just goes into the pile of things that get used inconsistently and don't hold data.
Which, right, Ron, you made a great point about the flashy sales pitch and all. I'll make a note there because that's got a special place in my heart, man. Just again, people who have no idea what it's like to sit in either of any of our seats, right? Work every day in an AEC firm. And then, right, they make the sale and they completely wipe their hands clean of the problem. So if you're listening and you relate to that, right, a discussion with Rod and Alex might be beneficial because they are coming probably from a similar perspective that you are. Which then leads me into my next question for you, Alex. So if you see an AI pilot, right, let's, whatever stage this firm is at in their journey, gets a pilot off the ground, but it ends up stalling or failing. What are the most common root causes you find when you dig into it? And then what are you typically addressing first with that client?
Yeah, I would say there's a few patterns I see pretty consistently. I would say they never really get attributed to the right cause when something goes wrong or it stalls. So I would say the first is data that was assumed to be clean. Everyone thinks their data is the cleanest or doesn't like to admit how dirty their data is. If it's not clean and consistent, when we actually looked at it in its operational state, so for example, field naming conventions for each job site is super different. Project data lives in a few different systems across a few different servers, and you're not talking to one central place, and nothing ever gets reconciled. The maintenance logs are a little incomplete because people never fully fill them out, or all those fun things that go into it. So that's usually number one and the biggest one almost always. The second, I would say, kind of to Ron's point, is the process ownership was never clearly established. Like everyone's focused on the tech instead of like the actual process. Who's going to own this process? Who's going to be part of these things? There's a workflow that the AI was supposed to improve. But when I start asking who owns that workflow, like end to end, and I get 3 different names, and all of a sudden I'm talking to 3 different people, and the system's getting built without the actual process owner in the room, or I'm talking to one they think someone else is the process owner. So kind of like when it lands in the final person's hands, they weren't around for the work that I built around it. So that tends to happen as well. And then honestly, the third one, and I think this one surprises people the most when I name it, is success was never defined clearly enough to be measurable.
Mm-hmm.
So the pilot was approved. Everyone's hyped about AI. Everyone wants to implement it. I mean, it's great. I love that enthusiasm. But the general expectation of improvement was very vague. 6 months in, a year in, whatever, 3 months in, nobody can agree on whether it worked or not, because we can never fully agree up front on what working would look like. So like when I get into these stalled implementations, the first thing I address is like the process ownership, not really the data or the technology. It's who's accountable for this, whose workflow, who owns this workflow? Are you invested in this system succeeding? And if the answers are ever unclear, then we got to go back to the drawing board and establish process ownership before we even talk about technology ever again.
We say people, process, and technology in that order.
Exactly. That is a great saying.
And it's right, the difficulty in that order starts to go down. Technology is the easiest part.
Oh yeah, easily.
As you guys know, process and people are tied together like that, and they are, right? It's just working with people. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not easy.
People are different at every organization, how people like to work. I think understanding how they like to work and like the different mindsets and things. I forget the exact term for the study of that, but yeah, how people like to work and operate is very good to understand when dealing with a lot of these things.
It's some subset of organizational behavior, something like that. Yeah. I'm sure. Okay, well, really nicely said, Alex. And then Ron, I'm gonna kick it back to you. So as you start working with your teams, right, your subject matter experts at any level of the company, you may try to, as part of the process, move away from legacy workflows towards a more data-enabled process. So what does managing what will ultimately be some amount of internal resistance look like through that process? Because as we just mentioned, people have ways they like to work, especially those who have been doing things a certain way for a while.
Sure. I think you mentioned people as the first challenge, and I think that's where it starts. Realistically, yes, we have the people that are very vocal about AI coming to take their job and can never be better than an engineer, and how could AI ever stamp a drawing? And there's things that come up and they're loud and it's great. And those are not the problems that are giving me challenges. Those are the ones that I hear about vocally, but it's the people that are more passive in their resistance to AI that it's the real challenge. They show up to the meetings, they nod their heads, they say, oh yeah, okay, we're going to do this new workflow. AI is going to be involved, but then they just go back to what they've always done, the tools and systems they always use because it's easy and they're busy. And that resistance isn't irrational. It's a response to a misaligned incentive. Basically, they have to get their job done, and they see learning this new thing as an impediment to doing that job. And so really it's a lot of patience. It's a lot of waiting for the problem to come to you. As much as I would love to go seek out these problems and solve them in the organization, if no one's aware of them, I'm too soon, and no one's going to listen. It's that, the day job analogy works again. They're trying to do what they're trying to do, and they hear somebody saying the sky is falling, and it just sounds like doom prophecy, and they're not gonna pay attention. So there has to be a pain point. It has to surface. There has to be a group of people that are willing to work on it. It can't just be me. Technology never leads it. And so that's the tail wagging the dog analogy. And I think for me, the reality is that a firm that's 125 years old, successful, been doing this for a long time, there's a lot of institutional knowledge embedded in those workflows, a lot of exceptions that AI is not going to catch, some new workflow is not going to catch. And so if you take those people out of the equation, you miss those exceptions. And so it doesn't work for the full use case that they need. So that's a big piece of it. I think what it actually looks like day to day is one-on-one conversations, finding the people that are excited and they're champions, not necessarily in a leadership position, but they're in a position where they want to do something. I always have a challenge where I've got a support staff. I am not production. I'm not directly producing revenue for the company. And so the amount that we spend on that is not always going to be forward leaning, meaning until we have a need that necessitates bringing on more support staff, we're not going to bring them in. So it's very hard to really push development without having a few insiders, a few people that are in those functions in a technical discipline, and somebody who's excited and going to go bring something to light. Like we had an engineer that he created this mechanical calculation software that used to be a workflow where you had to take it out of Revit, put it into the separate tool, remodel it in the separate tool to do duct static calcs, and then you would get your calculations and then go inform your schedules in Revit. And so it's this big back and forth process. So he used Cloud Code to make this software tool that's embedded in Revit, does the duct static calcs perfectly. It's all ash rate tables and things that haven't changed for decades. And it spits out the results. It's integrated in the model. The schedules are updated. It gives him all the outputs to QC. The QC engineer can see the outputs in real time. I think that type of grassroots effort is something that I can take. We could say, okay, here's an example of something that I want other people to do. Here's a guideline on the things you should ask, the questions you should ask as you're developing it yourself, vibe coding. And I can shepherd the process with volunteers that are really motivated to make change happen. So it's a lot of, I gave you a really broad answer. I realize that I'm all over the place, but it's.
Well, I think it was that was a perfect answer. And then here's my follow-up question. How is this any different than Excel, right? Like you guys have been in it, right? Now, Ron, kick it back to like however many years ago.
Yep.
And you're running, you say you're running calcs from a spreadsheet somebody made a decade ago. Like your job as the engineer is to go pick that thing apart and figure out how it works and make sure you can trust the outputs.
Yep.
So, and somebody drew this analogy, which I think is perfect. I think it might have been KP, if you guys know him. It's like AI and Excel. When you show up to a job, nobody teaches you how to use Excel. It's assumed you have some baseline understanding. Everybody's understanding of Excel is different. Some people literally just like type numbers in. Other people are building pivot tables and macros and all this crazy stuff. But at the end of the day, as an engineer, your job is to, right, it's your stamp, your license on the line, and your name and your reputation. Whatever way you do it, you need to make sure it works for you. And I love that analogy. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot more damage AI could do than Excel, I guess maybe than some macro that ends up being a virus or something, right, guys? But so my question to you guys, how is it any different? Like, where do you guys see if you take that analogy and run with it?
Yeah, we actually use that analogy when we were developing our internal guidelines for this. The number one question that we ask is, how do you provide visibility into what the tool is doing? And that, if you can answer that, then we can get into the easy ones. How do we maintain it? Who takes the tool and keeps it working if you're out of the office so you can take a vacation? But the visibility piece is it. That's Excel. Excel's biggest advantage is visibility, but we'd be foolish to say that Excel is great. Anytime you modify a cell, break a formula, all of a sudden the calculations are wrong. And so in some ways, the AI tool that you create or use, it's even better because it can't break. Somebody can't go in and modify a cell easily. It's development code that we're having AI agents connected to and checking. And it lives in a repository that we control and maintain, and there's documentation for. And so I think the reality is not, I love the analogy. I love that, we've been using these engineering calcs in an Excel sheet for years. And so the liability is already in self-grown, self-developed tools. The answer is not to say, don't use AI. The answer is to make sure that you're providing visibility and maintainability and you're looping in the right functions of the business to make sure that it can be deployed in a safe and reasonable manner.
Yeah. And when you talk about, right, the maintenance of it, it's like, as the SME engineer, right, you're not going to play developer or IT And then coming from the IT side, you're not going to play professional engineering. Well, Ron can because he doesn't just play PE, right? He is one, which is why I think you're uniquely positioned to be having these discussions.
Yeah, you call it the integrator role. That's exactly what I see a successful CTO at an AE company. A company that's going to succeed with AI in general needs that integrator role. They need somebody that can see both sides and connect pieces together.
Really well said. So Alex, I'm going to kick it back to you because this builds off, what Ron just very eloquently stated is there's always going to be a gap. And you guys know me, and I'm not fond of crappy marketing pitches that don't get to the core of what we need. So there's always like, hey, the demo looks great, right? It's nice and solid, everything works. Then it actually gets implemented, and it looks nothing like what you were sold. So tell us about that gap, and then how do you close it?
Yeah, I mean, the widest gap I would definitely see is, I like to call it, and I did not coin this, I just see people say it all the time, is like the AI theater and the operational value. So like, I feel like a lot of AI right now, the whole market right now is very heavily incentivized to produce very impressive demonstrations. Like you'll have other, not even just like consultants, but like other vendors show up with like this great polished demo that's like built on the most clean, immaculate data or very curated data sets or seeded data, like in a very controlled environment. So they walk in and they show the Rons of the world, like what's possible through this compelling, demo that was designed to like look that way. It's not really designed to reflect like the actual environment of what real data looks like across like process constraints and actual organizational dynamics and the dichotomy of how each org is different and like the people sitting in the room. So I would say that's like definitely the biggest gap I see. I kind of talk about that a lot as well. Like I always come with a demo, like it's part of the business, like you have to, but I always try to make sure like I get something from my client of their real data so I could show them what it's genuinely going to look like. Like I'm like, hey, give me a spec sheet. Hey, give me some drawing. Give me something that you would use so I could show you what it's realistically going to look like instead of like my fake data that's going to look immaculate and clean. But, I always start, like, I would say AEC firms are, just in general, like, they approve the budget based on what they saw in the demo. And then the implementation, like you said, Nick, starts with this implicit assumption that that's like your real environment and it'll behave just like the demo environment. But I would even go to say almost 100% of the time it never does.
And then,
your data's...
Yeah, I was going to say, right then, the team who sold it to you, typically like an AE and then a sales engineer.
Oh yeah.
Where are they once implementation starts, guys?
They pass it off their technical team with some crate, like they sell you the world, and then it gets to the technical person that's going to build it, and they're like, man, who told you that we're going to do this? And then like you said, they're out in the wind, man. They get that commission and they usually disappear. But I would say like what they really need is just like a consultant or a consultancy that will just tell them the truth about what their environment looks like, set realistic expectations, define what success looks like before even committing to scope. And then, someone who will push back on the, exciting use case. Like I get people always super excited about like, oh, this awesome thing. I'm like, okay, like I don't want to talk about the glamorous stuff, but sometimes you got to talk about the unglamorous stuff, like the foundation, like we talked about a little bit earlier, Nick, like the data, the foundation, everything that's built on, start there and then build your framework up from there. Like you can't start without a good foundation. So I would say start there, define success in terms of measurable business outcomes rather than like, I need this done in 3 months or I need this done in a year. Like talk about measurable outcomes. That's typically the harder conversation that I have to have, but it's a harder engagement to sell. But honestly, like it's also the only version in my eyes that produces like a client that's going to call you back and also like a long lasting relationship.
Absolutely. And Ron, I'll throw it back to you here. So when you look at how AEC firms structure their technology leadership today, what's the missing piece that slows you down, doesn't allow you to use, data and actually making your decisions for the business front? Because not everything you guys do ultimately has to be tied back to some business outcome, or otherwise, it's not gonna make sense.
Yeah, I think the most common gap that I see and that I saw at Wiley Wilson even is that technology leadership exists, but it's a support function. It's not integrated with strategy. It's not integrated at a change governance level. There's not a change governance team that involves more than just IT. For us, it's our CFO, our COO, me. I report to the CEO. I don't report to one of the operational functions. So I think that's key. It's does your technology leadership have a seat at the table when it comes to project, hiring, capital decisions? And if you don't have that, you're going to keep making these one-off tools in functional silos, and that data is going to live in a silo. It's not going to get used consistently. The data is not going to get entered consistently. And so if you don't have somebody thinking through it, and I don't mean one person, I mean a change governance team that's connected and is a funnel and is pulling in these types of change initiatives for the organization and connecting them together, you're going to fail. And I think, like talking to Alex, that should be one of his like interview questions for when he's picking up a new client. Like, do you have a change governance team, and is it somewhere close to the top of the company, or is it a bunch of volunteers that have no actual authority? I think that's the challenge. When I worked with our leadership to establish a CTO position, they asked me the questions like, can it be a VP of technology? Can it be a director of technology? And the answer is no. If this is going to work and we're going to succeed, it's got to be at the table of decision making. And so I think that's hard to do. It's especially hard to do for a smaller company when you're talking about a very high investment in an individual, especially if you've never had that before. But I think the structure, that the discipline process that you have to develop is a structural one. It's governance. And if you make technology decisions ad hoc, project by project, principle by principle, it's not going to get adopted by the firm. It's not going to propagate. It's not going to even get retired when it's not functional, or it's got huge problems. And so you end up with this portfolio of unmanaged tools without accountability and without connection, which is what you need for AI to work. And really, that's it. It's if you're going to make an investment in AI, that investment is not going to succeed if you don't have your data connected and you don't have your workflows that rely on that interdependent data connected. And it doesn't matter how much you spend, you're not going to fix that problem.
And to the audience, if you're wondering what Ron means by connected, copying and pasting from software to software is not connected, speaking from experience.
That's correct. If we got to email around the spreadsheet to get the data in, that is not a repeatable process.
So yes, so don't be like me a few months ago. Be like Ron after Ron gets the opportunity to correctly implement technology at his firm. Okay, so Alex, I'll kick it back to you for the last question here of the session. So your firm, right? You're in our industry, traditional, right? We understand all the adjectives that can be used to describe AEC. Looking to adopt AI and new technologies. So what do you focus on from a leadership and team development standpoint to actually make it work?
Yeah, and that's definitely a conversation we've been having a lot more of lately. I would say like the biggest failure I see isn't like kind of the lack of vision or budget. It's an honest internal assessment. If you can't tell by my answers I've been given, it's really just like same thing. Leadership team approves something. AI initiatives are based off an external benchmark or whatever the demo was, or what our competitors appear to be doing well, which they always outward facing is always the great things, or whatever's promised. But I would honestly say the most important leadership discipline in like an AI transition, or like if you're hiring an AI leader, is they need to have the willingness to ask uncomfortable questions about your own org and act on the answers, even if it's going to slow things down. I know like I felt guilty of this, of like speed is everything when adopting AI, which is true. I mean, like you need to build fast, have people excited. It can't take too long or people lose interest. But like you really need to ask yourself, like, what process do we own clearly? Where is our data unreliable? Where is our data living? Which are the people that are going to resist the most, and why? And what are the reasons actually legitimate, or is it just like, some unlegitimate reason? Not to diminish anyone's opinions, but what are those conversations? And having them are harder in my opinion than approving a budget and a line item and then just moving on with the implementation. But on the inverse, I would say if you're on the development or more technical side, the gap I would see is really the organizations treat AI implementation as a project with like that end date, rather than a capability that you're building over and over, like over time, and also like how much value it's going to add. The vendor, can build the system, the team gets a 2-hour training about it, and then all of a sudden you're live. Like, I don't think that goes well. Like you said, Nick, all of a sudden after that, the vendor leaves, you're like a year and a half in and the system's running, but no one in the org like really knows like what it is, who built it, or understands how to use it.
And that's, at our consulting firm here, right? It's like there's a reason our business model is a monthly ongoing relationship, because we realize people are just they want someone to ask questions to. They want, hey, can we just have a refresher training? Hey, we had this question. Can we do this? And it's like, guys, that is all perfectly acceptable. And instead of trying to here's another product we have to start billing hourly, it's here's your rate. Come when you need help, use us, and you have the confidence to let your people get what they need without additional surprises.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of what I'm seeing is vendors are building more of a dependency rather than capability. Whereas I don't want you to be dependent on me. I want you to come to me when you need something, but I want you to be autonomous. I don't want you to have to always worry about coming to me if you don't need me.
And we call it the strategic ladder, because we're going to start, even if it's hey, we're going to implement Claude, we're going to get everybody on chat and co-work, and then it's okay, we're going to climb the strategic ladder. What's next? Is it do you want to build skills to actually use your documented workflows so everybody can have them distributed to the team and use them? And then we're climbing, right? We don't want to be working on the same problems with you week in and week out. We want you to be successful. There's still I think an opportunity for an ongoing relationship, because you guys know there's an infinite amount of problems to solve in any business. There just is. So that's the way we tackle it, guys. I'm sure you could relate to some of that, but excellent. But yeah, thank you both for taking the time to join us today. If the audience has questions, wants to connect, what's the best way for them to reach you guys?
Yeah, for me, probably LinkedIn is the best way. I post on there constantly. I usually am on there doing some sort of thought leadership or posting about AI in general. I don't really sell anything on my LinkedIn. I mostly just talk about the things I'm seeing in the AEC space, as well as what's going on in the AI world. Or you can just reach out to us at reich.com.
I'm going to piggyback on that answer and just say LinkedIn.
Beautiful. And I'm pretty sure that's right between, we all connected through some way where LinkedIn was involved. So Alex and Ron, it has been a pleasure. Have a great weekend, gents, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Nick. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Yes, sir. Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all your engineering and technology endeavors.